Welcome to Gospel Preview. I am Reverend Alex, Director of Formation, and joining me are Leta Parks. Hi, Leta.
Good morning.
And Ian Kennedy. Hi, Annie. Ian.
Hi there.
Hi. And so our Gospel reading this week for this Sunday is Luke chapter 16, verses 1 through 13, and I'm going to share that on our screen so we can all take a look at it. As is our custom, I'm going to begin just by reading the passage, and I'll do so slowly and intentionally. And I invite you to just do two things. To one, absorb the passage, just sort of hear it, take it in, make sure you understand it. And the second thing I ask you to do is to just pay attention to any word, phrase, or image that might pull on you, stand out to you, stick with you. A reading from Luke. Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to the man, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do, now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors, one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." Hmm. There's a lot packed in there. It's very confusing. I can ask, I mean, part of me wants to ask, do you need to hear it again? But I could start by asking what, if anything stood out to you, if there was anything, word, phrase, image that stood out to you. And I leave this up just so you can still look at it for a minute.
And,
Squandering.
Squandering.
and I'm real confused by make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth.
Yeah, I am too, Lita. Especially when it follows it up with whoever's dishonest in a little thing is going to be dishonest in big things.
Mhm.
Yeah, squandering and make friends with dishonest wealth. Yeah, I'm gonna stop
Shrew-
sharing. What?
Shrewdly also stood out.
Yeah, right. Hmm.
And then the last thing for me was not strong enough to dig, ashamed to beg.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation. I think I sit here as an older generation than the two of you, and I wonder what that means too.
Yeah. Hmm.
Friends for yourselves.
Are we still pondering the text? I can leave it for a minute, but I'm also happy to take it down when we're done and want to transition to some conversating. Hmm.
I'm reading that last paragraph again in
Yeah.
context of the first one. I wasn't faithful in very little.
Hmm. Have you had a chance to read it, Ian?
I'm getting stuck on it, but we can
Yeah.
move
Do you
on.
want to say, can I stop sharing? We
Yeah,
can
go
see each
ahead.
other. What are you stuck on? That's good. Could be a good place to start, or all these have been great places to start. Yeah, I don't promise any answers here, but
I'm stuck on this notion of being faithful to dishonest wealth,
yeah,
that somehow that yeah, I don't know. I feel like there might be some cultural context here, but I don't quite grasp what he
right.
did shrewdly and why he's being praised and what this
Yeah,
has to do with the eternal.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree, and I had not had time before this call to get into some of the Greek, right? So the all the New Testament is written in Greek. That would be the original language it's all written in, and I have not had time this week to dig into that Greek before this call, before this time. I am curious about some of that language. I did go and look in the Bible about some of the context. What just what is Jesus responding to? Is he responding to something? It's the beginning of the chapter. It's verse 1. It follows immediately on the chapter. It wasn't very helpful. He's not necessarily responding to anything. He's talking to his disciples. That's interesting. He had been in the previous chapter talking to Pharisees and scribes who were mad at Jesus for eating at table with sinners and prostitutes, right? And sort of what we heard in last Sunday's, gospel about find the lost sheep, find the lost coin. And then what we did not hear in the gospel reading, but is in Luke 15, is the prodigal son parable.
Hmm.
Find your lost son. The lost sheep, lost coin, lost son. And then it's a hard a hard turn, right or left, a hard turn into this passage, what we just read. So that didn't elucidate very much for me. Um, does sound like there might be some follow-up that comes right after this, but uh, you know, it is the case that there's a theme in many of the Gospels around squandering. I like that. I hear that, there's this admonition often to not squander. We could think of the parable of the talents being one of the top examples of that, but there's a couple other, you know. Um, this man, the manager, the dishonest manager, as he's infamously named, um, is squandering his master's property. Right? That's the whole issue at the beginning of it. But then he does this dishonest thing of reducing everyone's bill, cutting it in half, cutting it by 20%, whatever it is, because he's not able to dig and and too ashamed to beg, which I love. I'm always I love one thing I love about Gospel Preview is that the things that it always surprises me what stands out to people, and I always love that. And I'm like, oh, that's like a throwaway line, but like it stood out, and yeah, there's got to be something there. Um, but he's come up with this scheme. So the dishonestness of it, it's not only has he squandered the master's wealth, but then he has also reduced how much the master's going to get paid back. Right? He's not going to get all his property back. It was part of the squandering, it appears. But then he's commended. I'm gonna have to pull it back up. I'm gonna share it again because it's a lot. It's a meaty one. And
Yeah, this was
luckily,
it was tough
Matthew
to
has to
follow.
preach on it. What was that, Ian?
It was tough to follow.
It is. It's slippery and it's contradictory. That's what I
Yeah.
was naming earlier too about the right being dishonest, but then whoever's dishonest in a little is dishonest also in much.
Well, and what's also contradictory, like he says, the
Yeah,
dishonest manager says, um, I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their home. So he's doing this for himself. I thought was, okay, he's going to take this money that
yeah,
he's cheated, but then his master ends up being glad about it and says, "Oh, good, you did the right thing."
right, right, right. Um, and let me say about the contradictions that sometimes what's happening there, and I think sometimes when the Bible, especially when it's this obvious and this like back to back contradiction, I think there's two things happening. One is Jesus is kind of signaling, don't take me literally, right? This isn't a literal lesson, right? I think about a few weeks ago, the blatant contradiction when we had the gospel reading. If anyone wants to be my follower, they must hate their mother and father, they must hate their children, they must hate all these people, right? And that um obviously Jesus does not want us to hate people, right? The second greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself. And so that's such an obvious contradiction that we're not supposed to literally take that true. So there's some of that, I think, going on here and some of the contradicting. The other thing is I sometimes wonder, and I sometimes believe, more than wonder, that parables are more about the state of your heart and the state of your soul than the state of your mind. I think we sometimes come at parables and we want to understand them. We actually want to turn a parable out of a parable and want to make it a what's the word for that? Like a the word is gone, but like how we tell um fairy tale stories to kids sometimes and they have a moral lesson at the end, like, and thus you're always be honest, or and not like Pinocchio whose nose grows so big or whatever, right?
Right.
Like, but parables aren't actually supposed to be like that. Like, they don't actually have this one-to-one relationship of here's a story and here's the lesson that comes out of that story, right? Certainly some Christians see it that way. How the Episcopal faith kind of approaches parables, and this is steeped in lots of tradition, going back to, if nothing else, some of our Jewish ancestry of like the rabbi says something, but then we all argue about it afterwards. Um, is this notion that in godly play we say it this way. When we tell a parable in godly play, which we do not tell this one, and godly play is our curriculum for kids in Sunday school, we bring the parable out in this gold box. And we wonder about the box, and we talk about how a parable is a mystery, and we may not fully understand it with our heads, but we can enter that mystery with our hearts. And so sometimes parables are more about trying to, this is a long preamble to get to my point, which is to say that I think sometimes the contradiction is there to break our minds, to get it's sort of like a Buddhist koan. There is
Mm.
no there is no figuring it mentally out. And I'm listening to you, Leta, and I think you're cluing into something that is interesting. Right. the manager is scared that he's going to be out of work and he can't figure out what else he's going to do for work. And we might think that he would take the 50 and the 20 that he skimmed off and take it for himself. But that's not what he did. He used it to build relationships, right? To build goodwill amongst people. And that seems to be what is being praised, particularly when he says in the second paragraph, or is it in the second paragraph? Where is it? Somewhere he says, make friends with dishonest wealth.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's something to clue into. It's not make more money off of dishonest wealth. We see a lot of that in the world, right? It's not insider trading. Figure out how to make the most bang for your buck. So the focus is still on relationships, right? Build relationships, build goodwill, build um, the this might be a little too much to say, but I hope not. The salvation for the dishonest manager isn't found in building up his own wallet, but found instead in building up his community, right? And building friendship and having a community that will welcome him into their homes when he's cast out, right? So using salvation not as eternal salvation in this moment, but using the word in terms of what's going to help him out of his plight, right? His embodied plight. And then it also seems like, so to get at like, okay, if the parable is not supposed to make sense, because I don't think the parable is supposed to make, I mean, the parable obviously isn't supposed to make sense because it doesn't make sense. I mean, let's just start there. If the parable was supposed to make sense, it would make sense. It doesn't make sense. So let's just start with it's not supposed to make sense. But it seems like with that second paragraph that the punchline is about you cannot serve God and wealth. Yeah, Leta.
Okay,
Yeah.
it says make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so
Yeah.
that when it's gone, they may almost like saying, whatever you have to do, do it, so that
Yeah.
you know what's supposed to say. And it reminds me, the poem by Robert Frost, Provide, Provide.
I don't. Can you tell us about it?
Oh, I really recommend it. It's a short poem, and it's my favorite poem of all time. But it's like this. It's like it's being ironic,
Mm.
you know. Um, the rich that came, the withered hag, to wash the steps with pail and rag, was once the beauty Abishag. And then it goes on to say she's been forgotten, and she should have used all of her wealth to make friends so that she wouldn't be forgotten. I mean, it's
Mm.
irony. And this reminds me, and I'm thinking, I bet this is Robert Frost was inspired by this because
Sure.
it's like, no, wait a minute, that can't be what you don't really mean that. It's almost like you're being sarcastic. And Dean Matthew has said to me a couple times, and it surprised me that he thought Jesus was being sarcastic in some of his parables. And I never
Yeah.
think of Jesus as being sarcastic, but maybe he was or is.
Right.
Um, because this is just like, oh, come on, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth. I mean, that's like, I don't think he really means that.
No, I don't think he does either. But
Yeah.
I agree. I
Anyway, I really recommend reading that poem. It's short, but it's really uh meaningful.
yeah. And I hear the parallels with what's happening here.
Hmm.
I think poetry is a good example of what I was trying to talk about. That poems don't always make sense with our brain, but they tap into something. And I think
Hmm.
that's the same way a parable is supposed to work. It's not
Hmm.
supposed to always make sense.
It kind of
And
taps into our fear.
yeah, yeah, they sometimes do.
Like I'm going to be out in the cold and I can't dig and I don't want to beg because I'm too ashamed. So, yeah, the more I think about this, the more to me it's almost sarcastic.
Yeah. And I think that's fair to hear in it. Yeah.
I think what I'm struggling with,
Yeah.
aside from all of it, is that the master commends him for acting shrewdly. But then it seems like I'm not sure what to make of this line. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches?
Yeah,
Is the implication that the dishonest manager was faithful with the dishonest wealth, or are these unrelated, or what's the connection?
right. I think that I would assume I'm not, you know, I this is one of these passages I will name that even priests get a little stumped by. And even when we've reflected on them, at least in the Episcopal tradition, because we are committed to that idea that there isn't one correct answer. We can't just memorize it of like, here's the answer, everyone. Um, but I would say, based on the first paragraph and based on the fact that the master commends him for acting shrewdly, that he has been faithful with dishonest wealth.
Hmm.
I would say that would be my read. So take it for what that is, that it's just my read, it's not the gospel truth. But I think he probably has been, quote unquote, faithful with the dishonest wealth, based on the fact that he was commended for his actions. Um, and so if the dishonest manager is actually somehow a hero figure, exemplar, uh, then I would say he's somehow fulfilling the second paragraph. That's
Hmm.
somehow unpacking what's happening in that first.
Yeah, there's a parallelism between make friends of yourselves by means of dishonest wealth so that you'll be welcomed into eternal homes. And then if you've not been faithful with dishonest wealth, you will not get the true riches. Like there's some
Right.
parallelism between the eternal homes and the true riches.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so now if you've not been faithful with what belongs to another, like there's kind of two readings of it. Like one, the what belongs to another, or maybe like many,
Yeah.
many more.
Oh,
Maybe
sure,
what
but
belongs to another could be what belongs to the rich man versus what belongs to the people who he forgave. It's not clear what, because it seems like the dishonest manager has been faithful to the debtors in
yeah,
some way,
but not the manager.
but
Yeah.
not
Or
the rich
not
man.
the rich man.
And the punchline is kind of you can't serve God and wealth, and so it seems like there's an implication that you can't serve the rich man and God at the same time.
Yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
thinking of
I think,
Robin Hood. If you've ever not been faithful with the dishonest wealth,
can you say more about Robin Hood? I think that's cluing into
well,
something.
if you're going to steal from people, then use it for good works. I mean, that's
I,
you know.
yeah, it does have a Robin Hood kind of feel to it in some
Mhm.
ways. I agree. I agree. I think what's helpful and too in a moment ago, what you pointed out, Ian, is that the rich man is not God, doesn't represent God, right? Because sometimes, when we over allegorize, that was, I think, the word I was looking for earlier, parables are not allegories. Uh,
Hmm.
when we over allegorize parables, we sometimes cast God as the rich man or whatever, right? Like, and sometimes the parable isn't about God in a way. I mean, it's not directly about God. God is not one of the characters in the parable story, is what I mean by that, right? It's about us and how are we treating one another and what are we prioritizing. Um, Sort of like last week when I talked about, Eileen had named like, well, we're the sheep, right? And I said, actually, I think you're the shepherd. Like, right? Like it's sometimes, yeah, we cast the wrong people in the wrong roles when we allegorize.
Hmm.
Um, hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and this is different. on a different topic, but the
Okay.
thing about the generations,
Mm.
okay, children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generations than are the children of light. Who are the children of light?
Great question. Great question. I mean, ostensibly, what Jesus is, I mean, how I think it is traditionally read is that the children of light would be Jesus's disciples, and this generation is often in the, most of the time in the New Testament, when that phrase is used, the people of this generation or this generation is often used negatively. It's a negative connotation. The people of this generation are, they're greedy, they complain too much, they whatever.
Adulterous, yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're adulterous. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They do
Mm.
all sorts of terrible things. So it is this one, I don't know if it's the only time, but it is one, and it's a rare moment where Jesus is kind of saying, you know, the people of this generation are onto something, right? And it reminds me of, and I'm not going to be able to quote it well enough right now, but I forget something about be as smart as snakes and but as innocent as doves. Is that ringing a bell for anyone? What is that passage? See if I can pull it up on my phone Google machine. Um, why? Why? Oh, maybe yeah. Wise as serpents, harmless as doves. It's from Matthew 10, verse 16. Listen carefully. Oh, whoops, I clicked a button and it changed 1 minute. I am sending you out like lambs into a pack of wolves. So be as wise as snakes and as innocent as doves. It's not as much of a parallel as I thought, but it still kind of rings. There is like this subtle message in the Gospels. It's definitely not a dominant message, but the subtle message about remember you're human beings and you need to be smart about being human
Shrewd,
beings. You
shrewd,
need to be
yeah.
shrewd. You need to like don't get so lost in all this following me business that you kind of forget that. And I think about that sometimes when I've certainly been guilty of this when I have you know, well, God will protect me. I can do this foolish thing because God will protect me, right? I don't need to be so worried about X, Y, or Z about the future because God will take care of it. And then I
Right.
got there and God didn't take care of it. And then I was kind
Yeah.
of like screwed. And I was like, oh crap, I really should have prepared more for maybe a meeting or, my budget or whatever it was, right? And so there
Mhm.
is a little there it's certainly not the dominant gospel message, but there is the subtle and you can find it other places like Matthew 10. Is that what I said that passage was from?
Mhm.
Matthew 10. Um, where Jesus does say, um, you're don't forget your people, and you have to deal with this people world.
Mhm.
And the people world isn't God's kingdom. It isn't all rainbows and easy street and justice prevails all the time. Sometimes you got to be a little shrewd. Sometimes you need to be as wise as snakes. Be as harmless as doves. Don't be malicious. And maybe we hear that here of like what you pointed out, Leta, that the dishonest manager doesn't just pocket the extra money, right? He's not being greedy in a financial sense, right? He's not taking the money for himself, the wine or the wheat. So be harmless, don't cause harm, but do be shrewd, right?
It's that's very comforting. I mean,
Yeah,
because it makes me think of, I think it's the lawyer Dick Nicodemus was his name,
yeah,
what can I do to gain eternal life? And I
yeah.
follow all the commands. It's like to me that passage has always been, oh, look, I follow the law, I do this, I do that. And Jesus says, oh, you know what? If you really want to be perfect, then give up everything and follow me. It's almost like Jesus is saying, really, you really want to do this? I mean,
Right.
that's kind of like this, hey, look at, you don't have to do everything.
Yeah. Right.
Does that
Right.
make
Right.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that too in that passage, that Jesus is definitely like frustrated with this guy who thinks he's everything and is like, I definitely hear some Jesus sarcasm in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah.
I think, you know, that's where like Martin Luther struggled so much with being perfect that he finally just said, oh, forget it. I can't be good enough. I just have to have faith,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm getting too far off.
No,
Uh,
I don't think you are. I mean, I think there is some I I want to hear a little bit more if you're willing, like about so when I said this about like there's this subtle message in the Gospels about like don't forget your people and you have to deal with human systems and navigate that. You said it made me feel good, that was relieving or something you said. And then you said it makes me think of and then you went on to that other that not parable, that story.
yeah, the
Um,
story, you know.
yeah. And so can you tell me a little bit more about the relieving?
Yeah, because you know, I can drive, I could say you can drive yourself crazy. I can drive myself crazy, thinking, what should I do? What should I do to be good? Kind of like
Yeah.
Nicodemus. And then I
Yeah.
think about Martin Luther and how he struggled
Got
to
it.
the point of almost being insane and
Right.
and finally just said, you know what? I can't be good enough. I have to just be a person and have
Right.
and that's what, to
Nice.
me, in that parable about Nicodemus, or the story
Right.
about Nicodemus, um, Jesus said, you know, okay, give up everything and follow me. In other words, you can't be perfect enough. That's what I get out of that story.
Yeah, I see.
Unless you're just not even going to be a regular person at all.
Right, right. Yeah.
And there are those
Be
that
one
do
of those
that. I
children
mean,
of light.
yeah, I mean, there are people that, and I mean, you can't help but admire them. I mean, people, you know, the Mother Teresa's give up everything and do that, but most of us, we just don't have, you know, we have a faith of a mustard seed.
Yeah.
Um,
Naming that, what flashed in my brain, but I'm a little hesitant because I don't know how true this is, but it is what's flashed into my brain. Is I pictured, I read the Book of Joy, right, by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Phenomenal book, highly recommend to anyone who hasn't heard of it. Book of Joy. Um, There's not really something specifically in that book. They also made a documentary of it, and you can find it on Netflix and whatnot, where you can see the two of them talk. And I don't know if this is close enough, but I see some of that shrewdness when I see Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, I think of other less famous people, kind of have that twinkle in their eye, and they're like, yeah, there might be a corner or two I'm cutting, but like it's in the service of love, right? It's in the service of how do I make sure, what made me think of it is when you name Mother Teresa, the a thought that popped in my head was I was like, I've applied for grants before. When Mother Teresa's organization applies for grants or had, get money to continue to do the amazing work they were doing with lepers and all the thing, where are those like those moments where someone's just giving a little wink, doing a little subtle like crossing the fingers as they fill out the form, right? I've applied for grants before. There's a lot, grants ask for a lot, and you I am not endorsing outright lying, but there is some, let's make this sound a little more flowery. Let's try to talk this up, right? And let's try to soften some of the hard edges of this program or whatever it is, right? The little wink, the little nod, the little that kind of stuff. I don't know. And I just when you said it, that's all what flooded through my brain was those people who we know are good and are committed to doing good work, and yet they had to live in systems that are not always just. But they needed to keep they needed the money, even if that money was a little dishonest in some way. Uh, it also makes me think about this is a separate, so there's that. Separately, when I read the passage the first time, or at some point in reflecting on all of it, you know, um, this is very much how I see the world, and this is me talking as Alex Leach, not as some sort of priest figure. As Alex Leach, I kind of think all wealth is dishonest. When it really boils down to it, like, I mean, especially when you're talking, I don't know, like, yes, people get paid, for working hourly jobs, and that is very straightforward. Once you leave that very small, I mean, not that small, a lot of people are working hourly jobs, but once you leave that realm, it all gets a little squiggly in my brain, right? About how money works on a big scale and how things like the stock market works and how investing works. All that gets very squiggly in my brain, and I get very like, is it all really honest, right? And even with something like the hourly, wage, I always think about um it's about something else. So hopefully I'm not jumping too many levels myself, but um there's a Catholic theologian. Um, oh, his name's just gone out of my head again. Hopefully it comes later. And he's trying to talk about original sin. And he talks about think about a banana. And when you buy a banana, you think it's fine because it's just buying a banana. But when you think about the fact that the banana was grown on a plantation that is overworked, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
has workers who are working those fields and they're underpaid, and then it gets flown from some exotic island, and it creates all the carbon footprint of flying it to, Minnesota, and then it gets into a truck and drives, there's no bananas naturally growing in Minnesota, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and so that's his way of understanding original sin. It's like it's not anything you personally did or something wrong with you, but it's the fact that almost anything you do in the world is touched by this brokenness.
Yeah.
And we
Very
profit from it.
innocuously. What?
And we profit from it.
And we profit from it, and we totally profit from it,
I know
right?
who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right
I
now,
can't,
but he's a
yeah.
French Catholic
Mhm.
theologian. Um, so I think about that with money, right? That all money kind of has some dishonesty to it, has some sort of it's touched somehow by a system that isn't fully equitable, isn't fully based on justice, isn't fully based on mercy and grace and all these beautiful things, right?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, this is making me think that this reading of if you've not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, this dishonest wealth is sort of referring to the rich man's wealth to begin with,
Right,
not the wealth that the manager has somehow skimmed off or something, which it seems like he hasn't.
right, right. Sort of calls into the question the rich man, which would be fair because we know. So here's the cultural piece, maybe finally coming in, is that we know most people are not rich in the first century Israel, right? That is not the situation of most people. Most people are poor. 90%, 99% of people are poor. Um, and anyone who is rich, I think there are questions about how does that wealth accumulate, and to what extent that wealth accumulating has to be in cahoots with the Romans who didn't tax it all into nothing,
Hmm.
right? And so where is, and so this is a made up rich man, but the made up rich man represents the actual, not doesn't represent, but calls to mind for the audience any actual rich people in their midst, right? Rich people they know,
Hmm.
right? And we know because we know that the Romans typically tax people anywhere from 80 to 90% of their income, right? It was a lot. It was not like today's taxation where it's like, oh, we take whatever 20, 30% or less. It was, people, the scholars estimate it was anywhere between 70 to 90% of your income is taxed by the Roman system. So if someone's accumulated a lot of wealth, right? They're owed all this wine and bread and wheat. There is always kind of this question of what's your relationship with the powers that be? Why are they allowing you to be this rich?
Hmm.
You know? And so you're right, the dishonest wealth is probably pointing to this rich man to begin with, that the rich man's wealth he starts with, that the manager is supposed to be managing, isn't pure, right? This isn't just like, yeah,
It's making me think of I mean, we're all in this situation, even though we work, even if we work hourly, like we've just
yep,
been blessed the ability to live in Sacramento and live in
yep,
houses, and that's not the case for most
yep,
people around the world. And in some way, we're sort of the dishonest manager. We're squandering the property that we've been given on our own, whatever we want or we think we need. And it's yeah, so it's not a faithful. We're not being, in some sense, we're not being faithful with our own dishonest wealth, which we all possess just by virtue of being able to be on this call right now and go to church and
right,
whatever.
Yeah, use the resources, more resources than other people in other countries in the world. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, by a factor of probably 10 or 100 or
Hmm.
something.
And so perhaps, yes, I agree with everything. And so perhaps what it would look like to be faithful is that, okay, if you've been handed all this dishonest wealth, do you use it to build those relationships with the people who don't have anything,
Hmm.
right? Who don't, the people who are debtors, for whatever situation the dishonest manager is in, he's not a debtor. Versus these two other people that get brought up, they actually are in debt to the rich man. They owe him some money. They owe him a
Hmm.
lot of money. They owe him 100, what is it, 100 barrels of 100 jugs of olive oil and 100 containers of wheat. So I don't know, that seems like a lot to me. They're in deep debt to this man. And so the dishonest manager uses this dishonest wealth to build relationships with people who are in debt.
The other thing that's coming up for me is this,
Yeah.
the master is taking the position away from me. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. We're all in this sort of situation of, despite having a lot, situation of precariousness. We could lose our job. We
Yep.
could lose the rich man's uh,
Favor.
favor.
Yep.
Despite us thinking that it's all us holding ourselves up. I mean, it's just reminding me of
Yep.
this other theme of where we're really kind of, you can't save yourself. You can't pull yourself up. It's all precarious in some sense, despite how much we might think that we earned it or we're deserving of it.
And so yes, and so the only thing that is actually secure, according as I read the parable, is our care for one another.
Right,
Like the only thing that would truly be secure is community.
right,
And the fact that we look out for one another and take care of each other.
right.
That's the only real security in the situation. But you're right. I think you're exactly right. The manager is in a precarious situation and he can't actually help himself. He can't take care of him. There's no being self-reliant and pulling himself up by his bootstraps, right?
Right.
This is not what's happening. Leta.
Yeah,
Ashamed to
all
beg.
of our wealth and security is built on the backs of others.
Yeah, yeah. And the same is true in this parable. And so there is a way in which is being faithful somehow like recognizing that and leaning into that somehow, not in an exploitive way, but in a relational way, right? I think it would have been exploitive if he had kept the 50 jugs of olive oil and kept the 20, containers of wheat. But the fact that he doesn't take anything, he just builds the relationship so they would welcome him into their home,
Mm.
you know, there's the relationship building, the like, you know,
The true riches, the riches of
yeah, the eternal homes. Yeah, the
eternal
true
homes.
riches.
Mm.
Yeah. And so somehow going back to that final line, and then what I'm gonna do, because this is such a confusing and like weird thing, I think how I'm gonna end is I'm gonna read it one last time and invite you to name like Oh, what you might be taking away from this conversation, just as a way to close. But I still come back to that final line when you said, Ian, the true riches, you cannot serve God and wealth. But in the end, the punchline, and I know that what follows in our Bible, so after that, you cannot serve God and wealth. Verse 14, the Pharisees who were lovers of money heard all this and they ridiculed him. So he said to them, you are those who justify yourselves in the sight of others, but God knows your hearts. For what is prized by human beings is an abomination in the sight of God. And it goes on, but I do think there's something, despite how confusing this parable is, somehow it's trying to break down our love of money and our trying to serve money rather than God. That seems to be somewhat of the crux of what's going on somehow in this. Uh, yeah, Lita, look like
I just think, yeah, don't just have money for the sake of having money, which, a lot of people we can see in our society today just have money for the sake of having money.
right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's certainly a theme that we hear in lots of the gospel. I think of the manager the rich man who his field produced even more. So he's like, I'll build bigger barns. And then he dies that night, right? That was a
Yeah.
parable we had recently. So that's certainly a theme that we can hear in lots of gospel stories of don't just acquire money for money's sake. And even deeper, don't just acquire money to be secure for security's sake, right? Because what Ian was pointing out, true security is found in community, and us taking care of each other because you could lose all that money
Hmm.
very quickly. And right, you're too weak to dig and you're too ashamed to beg. So have the people, have the community that will take care of you. All right, like I said, this is very hard, and so I think a good way to end is I'm going to read it one last time, and we'll just do a short round of what you're walking away from this conversation with. Jesus said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned the manager and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. And the manager said to himself, what will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, how much do you owe my master? He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, and how much do you owe? He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager, because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. So, any final, what you're taking away from this conversation?
I think the line that hit me the most that reading was, I've decided what to do so that when I'm dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes. It just sort of seems like the crux of it to me that like we're all
Yeah.
on the verge of getting dismissed, whether losing our health or our,
Yeah.
this is speaking to you in a personal way right now. And,
Of
you know,
course.
neglecting community at the expense of building yourself up in some sense that that'll make you secure and safe when that's sort of an illusion.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Yeah. Leta, would you like to share anything you're taking away from this conversation? I know.
No, I just want to really ponder more. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much.
Yeah. I think that's a great thing to ponder. And I totally get it. I'm freely admitting that I'm confused and lost by this passage as well. And it's not my first time reading it. And it's still confusing and hard. What am I taking away from this conversation? Hmm. I think it's sort of related to what Ian's saying, but that examination of who am I serving when I do anything, right? And it doesn't need to be this binary of God and wealth, but who am I serving, right? It starts with no slave can serve two masters. Here's two potential masters, but we could add no slave can serve eight masters. Am I serving God, wealth, my own self-interest, right? Blah, blah, blah. The list goes on and on. But I think that examination of who am I really serving when I do any action, and that sitting with that and pondering that and thinking about what am I really seeking when I do X, Y, or Z. Oh. All right, I'm gonna stop share so we can see each other as we say goodbye. Thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
This is a rich conversation, even if it was frustrating and didn't have clear answers. But I was glad you were here for it, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
And Ian, it was good meeting you. Hope to
Good
see
meeting
you
you,
again.
Lena. Yeah, you too. Thank
Bye.
you.
All right, bye,
Thank
y'all.
you.